This idea is what Thoreau called the higher laws, which was about moving away from our animalistic urges. The next chapter is called Brute Neighbors, and it's full of lively, interesting descriptions of the animals around Walden Pond, like mice, sparrows, quails, otters, raccoons, ants, hunting dogs, cats, and diving birds. The part about the ants is especially vivid, and it feels a bit like Zhuangzi's writings. In the outer chapters of Zhuangzi, there's a story where two countries are at war on a snail's two horns, and all the bloodshed is just the snail's antennae from the outside. Thoreau spent a whole day watching a battle between black ants and red ants, and even took some of the fiercest fighters to his home in a glass jar to continue observing them. Their battles were as intense as gladiatorial fights in ancient Rome. Here's a part where Thoreau described the diving birds, which might be a bit unfamiliar to us. A diving bird makes this wild laughing sound on the lake and then suddenly dives underwater, popping up somewhere else. As I was paddling along the north shore, one very calm October afternoon, for such days especially, they settle onto the lakes, like the milkweed down, having looked in vain over the pond for a loon. Suddenly one, sailing out from the shore toward the middle, a few rods in front of me, set up his wild laugh and betrayed himself. I pursued with a paddle, and he dived. But when he came up, I was nearer than before. He dived again, but I miscalculated the direction he would take, and we were 50 rods apart when he came to the surface this time, for I had helped to widen the interval, and again he laughed long and loud, and with more reason than before. It was like a master in a martial arts duel. It was a pretty game, played on the smooth surface of the pond, a man against a loon. Suddenly, your adversary's checker disappears beneath the board, and the problem is to place yours nearest to where his will appear again. But why, after displaying so much cunning, did he invariably betray himself the moment he came up with that loud laugh? Did not his white breast enough betray him? He was indeed a silly loon, I thought. I could commonly hear the splash of the water when he came up, and so also detected him. But after an hour he seemed as fresh as ever, dived as willingly, and swam yet farther than at first. I concluded that he laughed in derision of my efforts, confident of his own resources. Every animal gave Thoreau interesting facts and reflections. He mused, why do precisely these objects that we behold make a world? Why has man just these species of animals for his neighbors? As if nothing but a mouse could have filled this crevice. I suspect that Pilpay and Co. have put animals to their best use, for they are all beasts of burden, in a sense, made to carry some portion of our thoughts. Pilpay is the author of the Indian Sanskrit fable collection Panchatantra. When Thoreau talked about Pilpay and others, he meant storytellers like Aesop and Jean de La Fontaine, who used animals to tell their tales. He said these folks were like burdened animals in a sense, carrying a part of our thoughts. That's Thoreau's reflection on these animals. Many people think that living by the lake is fine in the spring and summer, but what about winter? Especially on the East Coast, where it gets really cold. That's why there's a chapter called Heating the Cabin. Let's look at Thoreau's experience of the changing seasons. Already, by the 1st of September, I had seen 2 or 3 small maples turn scarlet across the pond, beneath where the white stems of 3 aspens diverged at the point of a promontory next to the water. Ah, many a tale their color told. You should really read this book slowly to savor the beautiful scenes. In October, thousands of wasps came into my cabin, getting ready for winter. Later, Thoreau chased the wasps out because they were too dangerous. In November, I moved into my winter quarters, just like the wasps. The north wind had already begun to cool the pond, though it took many weeks of steady blowing to accomplish it. It is so deep. I had got a couple of old fire dogs to keep the wood from the hearth, and it did me good to see the soot form on the back of the chimney which I had built, and I poked the fire, with more right and more satisfaction than usual. My dwelling was small, and I could hardly entertain an echo in it, but it seemed larger for being a single apartment and remote from neighbors. All the attractions of a house were concentrated in one room. It was the kitchen, chamber, parlor, and keeping room. I had in my cellar a firkin of potatoes, about 2 quarts of peas with the weevil in them, and on my shelf a little rice, a jug of molasses, and rye and Indian meal, a peck each. It was such a cozy setup. He was happy with the simple supplies for winter and the roaring fire on the stove. He loved burning the pitch pine he had pulled out of the lake. Even though the wood had been in the water for a long time, it was full of resin, so it burned fiercely. The pond had, in the meanwhile, skimmed over in the shadiest and shallowest coves, some days or even weeks before the general freezing. The first ice is especially interesting and perfect, being hard, dark, and transparent, and affords the best opportunity ever offered for examining the bottom where it is shallow. You could stand on the ice and look at the lake bed. At length the winter set in good earnest, just as I had finished plastering, and the wind began to howl around the house as if it had not had permission to do so till then. Every man looks at his wood pile with a kind of affection. I love to have mine before my window, and the more chips the better to remind me of my pleasing work. I had an old axe that nobody claimed, with which by spells on winter days, on the sunny side of the house, I played about the stumps that I had got out of my bean field. As my driver prophesied when I was ploughing, they warmed me twice, once while I was splitting them, and again when they were on the fire, so that no fuel could give out more heat. How fun! An experienced forest dweller told Thoreau that firewood would warm you twice because you sweat while chopping it and then get warm again when you burn it. Though, when I had been exposed to the rudest blasts for a long time, my whole body began to grow torpid. When I reached the genial atmosphere of my house, I soon recovered my faculties and prolonged my life. But the most luxuriously housed has little to boast of in this respect, nor need we trouble ourselves to speculate how the human race may be at last destroyed. We go on dating from cold Fridays and great snows, but a little colder Friday or greater snow would put a period to man's existence on the globe. That cold Friday refers to January 19th, 1810, a day recorded in weather history as having temperatures as low as 50 degrees in New England. So, in the warm cabin with a roaring fire, he felt just like living in a house with central heating today. In winter, people are especially prone to daydreaming, so Thoreau took the time to visit some of the people who had lived in the forest before him. There were all sorts of interesting legends, and I've picked one to share. Here, by the very corner of my field, still nearer to town, Zilpha, a colored woman, had her little house. Zilpha was a black slave who escaped and, after gaining her freedom, lived there alone. She spun linen for the townsfolk, making the Walden woods ring with her shrill singing, for she had a loud and notable voice. At length, in the War of 1812, her dwelling was set on fire by English soldiers, prisoners on parole, when she was away, and her cat and dog and hens were all burned up together. She led a hard life and was somewhat inhumane. One old frequenter of these woods remembers that as he passed her house one noon, he heard her muttering to herself over her gurgling pot. "You are all bones, Bones. I have seen bricks amid the oak copse there.